Disorganized, disorganized, reorganized play. It's disorganized, reorganized. Get organized today. Hey, 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 hey. Hi. Wow, that was a little bit of a show tune today. A disorganized play. Well, welcome. I'm Tom Lommel. I am your host. Ignore the fact that it says wildcards here in the chat title window. I don't know, we're having some funkadelic kind of things going on with Twitch. Whatever. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a wonderful long weekend. If you did, in fact, have a long weekend. What did I do? I played some Dungeons and Dragons on Saturday. On Sunday. It was a long weekend. I don't remember what I did this weekend. We just sort of hung out and chilled out this weekend. It was not very go. I played some video games. My wife went to the Taste of Los Angeles or some such event, and we did a puzzle, which is right here. Unicorn Forest. We did the welcome to the Unicorn Forest, everyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Unicorn Forest. It was actually it was nice. It's very. I thought it was very pretty. It was very thematic. It was only 500 pieces because we have found that doing a 1,000-piece puzzle is a great way to want to tear out your hair. So I hope everyone had I hope you all had a good time yourselves. Were safe, warm, and dry. Or maybe safe, cool, and dry. I don't know whatever you're in need of. I hope you got to indulge in that. So, we've got one last session or so of White Plume Mountain of the module as written, of course. So I want to talk a little bit about that today. For those of you who are unfamiliar, I run the game on Wednesdays. I prep the game on Tuesdays. Thursdays I come back and talk about how what I prepped is not what happened. So we'll also be doing a bit of that today, right? Let's take a look at our agenda. Pinging plot radar. We're back into the soup, everybody. As the trident turns, oh my, what could that mean? And then finally filling out the fun house, right? So those are our topics. We've got some things going on in this week's session where we really kind of need to queue up some things, and also we have some opportunities because last session they didn't really complete the entire spur of that portion of White Plume Mountain, so we've got some room to fill things up. Xenar Faith, thanks for subbing up 10 months in a row. You've got a reroll coming that you can bestow tomorrow night to one of our fine players. So let's switch over to show and tell time, as I like to call it, and take a look at our plot radar. I don't have my big pen. Let's fix that. Da, 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 da. Fuckwad. There we go. Thank you, BSB Care. There's the quote we've all come to know and love. Show and tell time. Hi, welcome to Plot Radar. So this is my method of tracking the plot elements that are out in our player's consciousness, or their awareness. It is a list of things that have yet to be resolved, like things that the players have yet to figure out or encounter, and things that the players aren't aware of that are coming down the pipe, right? So some of the things are like, well, they're aware of Gulthias, right? They're not aware of the exact nature of the Iron Keep, but that's got to be coming, right? So that's what the purpose of this whole thing is. So let's just do a quick check-in on what we've got on the board and see what we've got to move around and maybe what we've got to add, right? So the whole idea here is that as things arise during the play session, they move closer in our plot radar as to things that we definitely have to address, things that we have to address in the next immediate session, things that are coming within the next 2 to 3 sessions, and then things that are further than 3 sessions out that we think we want to keep track of, the players are aware of, that we want to that we want to introduce, right? They may not be aware of things in this column, but we might know, like big bad guys like Gulthias might be in there, right? Things that are dangling are things that the players are aware of that you're not intending to immediately follow up on. Things that are dormant are things that the players were made aware of, but they've forgotten about. So that's the difference between dangling and dormant. Oh, why do you have two different columns for that? Because one of them is, this is something that the players are aware of. Oh, the Iron Keep probably has something weird going on with it, but I haven't exactly figured out what that is. I don't have any immediate plans to resolve this in the next 2 or 3 sessions, right? Things that are dormant are stuff that, oh, we brought something up, but the players have forgotten about it. Oftentimes this is like a clue or something where they've done something, they found something. Oh, okay, we found a scroll case. Well, you know that the scroll case has a map in it. They just put it away, and then in between sessions they forget about it, and it never kind of comes back up. Well, it's dormant. You could bring it back into their consciousness if you want, but they've kind of like let it go. That's the quick. Wow, that's maybe the quickest rundown of Plot Radar we've ever done here on the show today. So, yeah, I don't know if there's anything else that should be dangling out there, but let's take a look now that we've had a session. Now this is from last week, so let's move some things around, right? So, tax voices and control of the voices, that got a little weird, right? Like that's kind of moving into the dormant category, or maybe the closed and retired category. This is where things have been resolved and we can just sort of dispense with them unless we decide to revive them. We don't have anything in here because we could have listed stuff and I just haven't, right? So yeah. I don't know what to do with tax voices and the control of the voices. I feel like I need to have an out-of-game little chat and talk with Amy. Like, did you guys have some sort of sideboard where you just decided you're not going to make it as big of a deal as it was? Which I'm fine with. If they've decided internally that they're just going to resolve it on their own, okay. But then that needs to be something that sort of needs to be addressed for all of you who are watching at home, so you understand what happened to that plot thread, right? So that's that thing. All right. I think in our distant category, this stuff can stay distant, right? Gingy's not coming in anytime soon. Gulthias is not coming in anytime soon. Bargad is maybe kind of a questionable one, right? Bargad could be in the approaching category, right? In our approaching category, freeing Dell, I don't think Dell's going to be freed at the end of next session. So I'm going to keep that as approaching. But the idea of how do you free Dell, which is related to Silent Whistle and the Whippoorwill Prophecy, that's definitely got to be something that comes up this time around, right? So we'll keep this here as these two things are connected, right? Bargat, what happened? I think that needs to stay in the immediate category, right? Hargat's son, we've introduced this. We haven't really explained what happened to him, right? Do we need to? I don't know. You know, it's interesting that there's this. I like the idea that there is almost a sort of like let me back up. So we gave this final spur of White Plume Mountain kind of an amusement park feel, right? Definitely, like they ride a flume. There's a lot of kind of like these animatronic dioramas, right, that are set up. It definitely has kind of this sort of playland, and I mean that in terms of an amusement park playland kind of feel. Very old-timey kind of Disney kind of garbage, right? Which is fine. I mean, like, I think that's interesting. So I think there's something going on here that's interesting in terms of in a magical world, you'd normally just set all this stuff up as an illusion. An illusionary dragon would come out and roar at you, an illusionary, sound and thunder and all that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of like mechanical stage magic happening here. So it raises some interesting questions like, why is it, even the ghost of the kid is an illusion, right? It's not a ghost, it's an illusion. It's somehow interactive. So we know that there's not undead spirits at play here. So what happened with Hargat's son, raises an interesting point of like, why would you go to this such extraordinary lengths to kind of create this? There was also called back in the session, or if we recall in the session, the sword that he is crying over, the ghost child is crying over, was crafted as a broken sword, right? It wasn't a wooden sword that got broken and he's like, oh no, I broke it. It's literally like a prop that was made in 4 pieces because it was broken. So there's something going on here. There's like a meta level of... There's a meta level of representation which I think is worth exploring or somehow explaining. Does that play into what happened with Hargat's son? I don't know. I mean, this post-it note just says Hargat's son, Daladar. We introduced him, but we haven't really explained what happened to him. I don't know if that's important right now or not. Now, they found pieces of Black Razor. They're going to reassemble Black Razor. That's going to happen this session. So we need to have an idea of what Black Razor is and how it can be deployed and what sort of attitude it has and that sort of thing, right? That's staying in the immediate column. And then Wave, the intelligent trident, got introduced last session. And that's definitely going to play a role in this week's game, right? Some sort of role. The thing about Wave is, in my mind, the trident has sort of this function as like a key within the Iron Keep, right? It unlocks greater potential, or it serves some sort of function within the Iron Keep, but it also serves as a weapon. They haven't really figured that out, and they haven't really ascertained what its purpose is or what it does. They haven't asked a lot of questions about Wave. I think that's going to change. We're going to talk about that in the next topic. Can you think of anything else on our plot radar that we need to add, that we need to modify? Because I think this board is pretty solid. The book is the Keep's prison or dungeon. That's our final thing that's in this immediate column, right? So we really haven't moved. It's funny because you could arguably move Wave like closer to the closed retired portion of plot radar, but I don't think it's closed or retired because they haven't retired it. Hargat's son, I don't think is closed or retired. The voices are the one thing that like we could possibly move into the closed and required section, and this Bargat thing might honestly like. Well, no, I think that's going to come up here in this next session, right? I think my anticipation is once you put Black Razor together, then some of these other things fall into place. Right? We're going to use that event as a trigger to unlock other avenues of clue dropping here, right? Oh yeah, there was a big thing about Warwent's wondrous inventions. I'll put that up there as dangling, because the players know about it. I don't know what we're going to do about it. We're just get pixels. Yeah, I agree with iDragon that they didn't really do much with Wave. I think that's going to change. All right. So, I think our plot radar looks pretty good. But I feel like we need to, here's the thing I want you to tune in on when you start using this tool. When things stick around, when your board doesn't change much, that should be sort of a red flag for you, right? Because it means that your plot elements are not moving forward. And that's okay. Like, it's okay to have a session where you don't get as much accomplished or you don't get as much information out there as you want. But if it happens 2 sessions in a row, now you have to start asking yourself, well, are my players engaged with the plot that I've laid out? Have they lost track of the threads? Are they off on a tangent somehow? Are they spinning their wheels and just kind of moving into combat for combat's sake? Are they pursuing some other goal of their own, which no longer is you're no longer tracking on your plot radar? Do you need to update the thing, right? So we added one thing, but we didn't really move anything. And that I'm okay with that, because sometimes you have a short session and sometimes the session is just mostly exploration and not a ton of exposition or plot development and clue development. But if it happens more than 2 sessions in a row, you don't move any of your markers, you need to like do a gut check. Like, is my game bogging down? Is the plot moving forward in the way that I think? So, yeah, as James V points out, there's a variety of different reasons why this stuff might not have changed. Like, they decided apparently like to take care of some of these things on their own. They didn't pursue a lot with Wave. They did start working on Black Racer, they just didn't get it finished, right? And these things, it's hard to get that information out there. We did learn some things about Bargat. The other thing that this might be indicating is that the major plot threads that we thought we were going to introduce last session, we didn't really either A, do a good job of introducing them, or B, maybe they weren't as hooked into that session as we thought, right? Like, what happened to Bargat? We got some history about Bargat out there, but that was not going to be resolved. So maybe this was a little aggressive to put this in the immediate category. I don't think this is just sitting down here in Sparks. I think this is a thing. So that's the other piece of it, right? Is you may have a moment where you go, oh, well, I thought I got ahead of myself. I tried to introduce some stuff that was actually approaching and not in this immediate session. So, iDragon14 says, when do you think you're moving Golthius into focus in the campaign? We really haven't seen much of him since he made the deals. Well, Golthius you haven't seen Golthius at all, right? Golthius is not the vampire that fed on Thawne and fed on Tack. That's Bargad, right? He's the fallen husband, right? Yeah. Is this about Hargat or is this about Bargad? I'm not sure what this one is. I spelled it 2 different ways. We got some history about Hargat. Oh, there was another question that I wanted to answer quickly, though. Yeah, so I don't know. Bargad is the husband. He is the wish-fulfilling vampire somehow, right? Whatever that means. He can come back at any time they decide to go back there. This ties into a question that, I don't know if it was BSB Care who asked this. S. Del Castillo asked, any plans to have them double back for Whelm? Well, as we've talked about, Bargad has been staked using Whelm, right? So Hargat, his wife, staked him through the heart and essentially has, killed him with Whelm. Although apparently, like, he's confined to this area or something like that. So I think in order for them to double back, they would have to defeat the vampire and then claim Whelm. I'm not going to. I don't know that I'm going to deliberately funnel them into that choice. I don't think they know that what the state of Whelm even is. We could put that in the dormant category of like, Whelm, the Warhammer. It's over here, right? So, I don't think it's. I think that's one of those things where that's an optional choice. And something has to lead them to make that choice, to decide, oh, we need this thing, this would help us. And I think they have to find out some more information in order to get there, right? Now, if we found out that Whelm is a key to some other, like the armory of the Iron Keep, that holds a bunch of other exciting, powerful weapons or whatever, or the library or whatever it is, that could be interesting, right? That could entice them to like, oh, how are we going to defeat this vampire guy? I don't think they really feel like they can take that guy on. I think they're scared of him. They're only 5th level or whatever. I don't think they're ready to try and tackle that. Doesn't mean they couldn't. I just don't think they're ready to do that. So, yeah. A lot of questions here. Let me catch up with the chat. So, was Gulthias turned into the Gulthias tree, or was that a separate entity somehow related to him? So canonically, the Gulthias tree is the so Gulthias was staked through the heart with a wooden stake, and canonically, that stake began to grow again, and it has absorbed some of Gulthias's vampiric essence, and it's creating all of these weird, like, seedlings and little weird vampiric plant creatures, right? So it's been charged with Gulthias, this vampire's essence, but it now grows of its own accord because it's become essentially like a vampire tree. But it's separate from Gulthias. Gulthias is its own vampiric entity, right? It's a different person. So there's the Gulthias tree, which is imbued with the power of Gulthias, and then there's Gulthias himself, who is obviously imbued with his own power to some degree too, right? So that's that question. Yeah, so, what happened? Why did he become a vampire? Would he fall from grace, etc.? That may come up. Yeah, so Black Razor could be a way to explaining all this stuff. Now, keep in mind, they still have Wave with them, so Wave could explain a bunch of this backstory too if they decide to engage with Wave, right? Would Thawne be against confronting Bargad because of the wish that he made? Maybe. It depends. Like, it depends upon how far down the road we're talking, right? Like, if Thawne finds out that this wish is the classical, like, devil's bargain where it's worse than what you imagined, then he may be like, I'm going to go back and get that guy who screwed me, right? But at this point, no, I think they're going to complete this section of the dungeon as much as they can, and then, quote-unquote, come up for air and find out, like, okay, so what's happened with Thawne's dad, and what's happened, as a result of freeing the voices, etc., right? So, I mean, I don't anticipate forcing them into an encounter or a battle with Bargad. All right. Oh, did I miss the boss battle, you guys? Boy. Yeah, I did. All right. That's fine. I could have gotten 64 gold. So angry. All right. Hey, everybody. So, this is our plot radar. I think it looks pretty good. Let's not dwell on that any further. We've got other topics to address today. A couple things. As the trident turns... I'm gonna let you all have a sneak peek here. Well, let's make some gold here, huh? Yes. I'm going to let you all have a sneak peek on tomorrow night's show. Havana has a show. She's doing a stand-up show tomorrow night, so she will not be joining us. And we've decided to kind of like keep things simple and not drop in a sub at this point. It's a little last minute to make that happen. So it raises the question, like, okay, what are we going to do about Avril's character? Now, I've considered a few things. We could very easily just put her back in the book and have somebody else come out of the book. It might be an NPC or something like that. But that sort of like raises the question of like, well, how does this book work? And if we just carry it around and it can suck anybody into it, like, isn't that a little dangerous? And should we get rid of it? And good, right? So all that kind of stuff. It also feels like a little bit of a retread of what we've already done. Like, it doesn't feel like a more interesting choice. We're not heightening the premise of the book by having it essentially just sort of recycle a plot mechanism that we've already deployed, no matter how plausible it is, right? Like, it makes sense, and it's also very convenient to just have her go back into the book and either have someone or not have someone else come back out. That's the easiest choice to make. I don't think it's the most interesting choice to make. Doesn't mean that every time we make a choice we have to make it the most interesting thing, but there's an opportunity. So let's think about the alternatives. And the main alternative that I've arrived at is that Avril is carrying Wave, right? The Trident. Now, to play on something very, very old school, going all the way back to AD&D, when you had a sentient item, right? When you had an intelligence magic item, it had stats. And there was often this convoluted system where, like, it had intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, and you had to compare its intelligence, wisdom, and charisma to your intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, etc., 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 right? And if you started doing stuff that the item didn't like, so say, for instance, you had a Holy Avenger's sword that was intelligent, and you were not using it to go off and slay devils and fight for the cause of justice and make things right and help out the downtrodden and the poor, etc., etc., etc. Instead, you were just using it to sneak into nobles' houses, defeat their guards, and steal stuff. The sword can turn on you, right? And essentially, there's like this battle of egos that happens between the magic item and the character. And if the magic item wins out, then the magic item gets to sort of control or take over the character. So, I'm just using this as an example. Why wouldn't you want to have an intelligent Holy Avenger? It makes if anybody's gonna make a magic item, it's gonna be somebody who's gonna make a magic item for a paladin, right? I don't know. That's what I think. Anyway, regardless of that, the point is, I think that Wave could essentially take over Avril. And not be necessarily like malicious or whatever, but be sort of frustrated with how things are going, or maybe it just kind of accidentally happens. But that sort of like that encapsulates the whole point of like as the Trident turns. I don't mean that as like the Trident's going to turn on the party, because I don't think that's very interesting. But I think it is a way that we can keep Avril's character involved, but have her played as an NPC. We have the possibility then for some role playing with Wave and the rest of the party that we maybe didn't have before. Because, you know, the stakes get raised a little bit. It's one thing to be like, oh, well, there's this trident, this magic trident that nobody wants to talk to because it's got this annoying voice and it blabbers on all the time. But it's far more interesting if, oh, okay, well, this magic item is now controlling one of our friends, right? So, that's... yeah, I mean, it's very possible that the characters will be negative against Wave. I think they'll probably metagame a little bit and go, you need to promise to turn her back over. And he might say, like, oh, okay, well, once Black Razor is back together, I will definitely do that. Or once we've returned to the main square of the Iron Keep, I will have fulfilled my purpose. You know, it does sort of... Wave has sort of hinted around that it wants to be doing something else, and this can be a way that Wave helps the party, but also gets what it wants, right? So... yeah, admittedly, the party is not going to trust it a lot. It does give them a more valid reason to plant Wave in the fountain and leave him. Admittedly, like, this is a, as you all point out, this is a difficult move to pull off. It is very, like, railroady, and there may have to be some negotiation, and it feels in a way sort of like more of a lawful evil act than a neutral good or chaotic good or even a lawful good act. Who knows? But I think there's a couple interesting implications for this, right? Which is, one, it allows them to, like, have her character available without doing a thing where, like, oh, okay, she just walks along at the back of the party and does whatever and stays out of harm's way and makes neutral decisions and is there for combat prowess and when you need a trap opened, but is really just sort of this, like, zombie NPC who follows you through the dungeon. I don't like that style of play. I often struggle with, you know, the party in my home game has, like, literally 3 or 4 different followers who go with them, and they always forget about them, except when it's incredibly convenient. Oh, why doesn't he just go open that? I tell him to go open that door. Okay, you haven't been sharing your treasure with him, you know, so that gets difficult, right? So that's one advantage to doing that. I think maybe they will see some kind of metagame advantage to the way that this plays out, so they might not fight it as hard as they normally would. I agree they'll probably do some negotiation with Wave of, why have you done this? Oh, we can't trust you. But there's a greater point here that I also want to demonstrate to them, that I want to get to, which is, you can try and collect these magical items, but you're still only 5th level, and if you think you can control something that someone who has apparently, like, gone on to some sort of demigodhood or something like that, like, you think you can control that kind of item, you might be out of your depth. And so if you think you can control Black Razor, well, you couldn't control Wave. What makes you think you can control Black Razor? So I want to get that idea out there, that these, you know, and that's a very old school take on intelligent magic items, but I think that's, you know, that's the whole playing with fire kind of thing, is that these things are super powerful, but they have their own agenda, and when you're not fulfilling it, you put your own destiny in jeopardy. So that's, I don't think that Avril is, you know, deserving of being taught a lesson. She's been friendly with Wave, and she seems to like Wave, and she hasn't been mean to it the way, like, Tack, for instance, has been, right? Tack has been sort of, like, openly scornful of Wave. But I don't mean to teach them a lesson, but I want to demonstrate you are fiddling with powers that may be beyond your grasp at this point. And, you know, that's fine. So I agree. I agree with all of your warnings are well taken. They're definitely something that you can, that it's a landmine waiting to go off when they put their foot on it in the in the session. So it's a DM move you have to be careful about making. But I think that it's a step I want to try. And if it doesn't pan out, then, you know, what's the worst thing that can happen? Like I have to come up with some other reason why Avril sits out for a session. Not incredibly difficult to do. Okay, well, she puts it down and you know, and steps back, but you know, suddenly she gets sick or something like that. So that's I don't know that. I think it also is going to provide a role-playing opportunity when Havana is back for like for Avril and Wave to have a conversation like, why did you do that? Well, I needed to, you know, I'm sorry. Is Wave sorry? It's a great question. I think there's a lot of interesting relationship things that get brought up when you have this kind of very hard DM move. So, yeah. Like I said, I could take the easy and convenient way out. I don't think that that's the safe choice, and I'd like to kind of like push this a little bit. All right. So that's that. And then, yeah, Thomas W. DeYoung points out, maybe the book could try to take Avril back, and Wave manages to stop it, but ends up taking her over by accident or as a consequence. Yeah, that could be interesting. In my imagining of how she got in the book last time, it was because she found this golden apple thing, one of these golden apple things, and tried it and ate it, and it sucked her in. But it could be something as simple as maybe if you read the book or you possess the book too long without the key, it just sort of sucks you in, right? James V says she should decide to sit with Wave and talk to the ghost child, and maybe feed Havana some information that she discovered from the conversation with Wave and the ghost child, and then there's no conflict between Wave and the party. Yeah, she could decide to just sit down between her and the ghost child and Wave and have a convo. It raises the question of, why wouldn't the party want to sit around and listen to that? Why wouldn't they want to be involved? There's no urgent, you know, time cap on this mission. So there's nothing that says, hey, we've got to go to X and such place. So that's one of those things that like they might go, oh, okay, well, we'll sit down too and listen. So what do they talk about? And now you're having the party, you know, eavesdrop on this conversation between two different voices that the DM is doing. It gets a little weird, right? But yeah, it is a good idea that like maybe Wave protects Havana from something and takes her over. Now, this actually transitions into our next point, right? Which is, when we last left our party, they were just getting back in the canoes. They had found the second piece of Black Razor, and they're just getting back into their kayaks, and they were going to go up the flume and then down the flume, right? Well, we know that Eric had to make this, like, well, who knows what kind of saving throw, but he had to make a saving throw because at the end of the flume, it just, like, completely blows you out of the kayak, right? What if there was some inherent danger there that Wave instinctively responds to? That's the prompt for when I took her over. Maybe the first time Wave is actually like dunked in the water, something changes or happens, right? So there's opportunity there. Just going into our filling out the funhouse topic, there's an opportunity there for Wave to be activated or have some sort of protection mode or whatever, and to work in a different way. Wave could also, like, you know, canonically Wave is supposed to like activate this cube of force kind of property, and maybe that happens, but it can't turn off. I'm scared. I can't let it down. And so Avril is stuck inside this force cube for a while. Then she's, you know, we know she's safe. She's stuck inside this thing. And we don't have to worry about, like, Wave taking her over, possessing her, etc., right? So that's you know, an interesting activation. It kind of like gets her out of the way. It, you know, accounts for where she is, but she's going to wait here and try and wait for this thing to wear off. Not bad. All right. Yes, Baba Lysaga has been introduced, right? That was just sort of that just sort of came up. wasn't very. In fact, we should put that out there. Good point. I'm just going to put it in the history montage. But actually, I think Baba Yaga's hut is an important. Yeah, maybe we will. James V says maybe it is time for Wave to do some Sunday school teaching about the power of the goddess. Very good. I think Baba Yaga's hut is out there as a dangling particular thing, right? That has some value. We also sort of touched on a Charlatan again, but I don't think that needs to go on the board. All right. So our last topic for today, actually kind of have two. One's not on the board here, but filling out the fun house. Now, according to the adventure, we really only have 2 or maybe 3 encounters left. Like, there was the whole net encounter thing, right? That I edited out, where the guard, the chief guardsman, or the corrupted fallen noble knight, or whatever he is, and his 8 veteran compatriots snare them out of the water and start attacking them. I edited that out when the first time that Grayson went through the flume ride. We could add that back in. I don't see how it puts anything interesting in play in terms of our plot radar. It could be an interesting fight where they're fighting against these nets. Once you get free, though, then it just sort of turns into a melee battle. So I'd want to keep that kind of short if we did that. So potentially disregard that encounter. That leaves us with the Shank encounter, right? That's where you go to play Shank, whatever that means. That's supposed to be the zero or the frictionless surface trap. So there will be a piece of Black Razor in there. And then there's a 4th encounter, which is with the Oni guy, right? The transformed Oni. They're supposed to get the rest of the treasure and whatnot. And he should have the last piece of Black Razor, is what I'm thinking, right? So that's really 2.5 encounters. It's not quite enough. It might be enough if we want to push a lot more information on the players, right? So really, so there's for sure there's. Let's talk about what our scenes for tomorrow kind of look like. We have to deal with Wave and Avril. That's a mini scene at the very least. We have to deal with the playing Shank, whatever that means. Figure out what that means. And then we have to deal with the Oni, right? So those things are happening for sure. Then, once they put all 4 pieces of Black Razor back together, the question becomes, what happens either with the ghost, or with the sword, or what? You know, somehow there's got to be a resolution. Once Black Razor is reformed, what happens? So those are 4 scenes that we're definitely going to encounter tomorrow night, right? The question is, based on that 4th one, is there enough to launch us further down the plot line? Is there something that happens as a result of that? Or does it lead us to maybe we go back into the surface of the Iron Keep, into that courtyard, and Wave opens up another scene? Or potentially we pad out a couple encounters here in the funhouse and add a thing or two, right? We've only got one door left to explore. So however that happens, either we need to tag it into the flume ride somehow if we add an encounter, or we need to attach it to this whole shank setup and make that longer, more extended than it already is, right? So I think the question really becomes, like, the frictionless room really feels to me sort of like a hockey game, and I think we can leave it at that. That's fine. The question becomes, like, what is the Oni encounter like? How does that? Where is that located, and how does that take place? Like, as written, he's supposed to be shifted into this, like, halfling form and kind of deceive the party, right? So it's a good opportunity for a role-playing encounter, but the question becomes, is it a negotiation? Is it pleading for release? What's the nature of that type of? Is it deception that then turns to treachery? Which, isn't necessarily a bad way to, like, put a button on that whole scene as well. Is like, okay, well, let's have a fight at the end, right? So there's certainly the opportunity here, as Christian Linke points out, that the kid is the Oni, or the Oni is the kid, or that the Oni is controlling the illusion. That has a kind of an interesting Wizard of Oz kind of feel to it, but that also ties into a kind of our Disneyland amusement park kind of theme of, like, he's the park controller. So that's an opportunity. And if that's the case, right? So if the Oni is controlling this thing, then he must be charged with. He must know why. He must know why he's there. What he's been. What kind of duty he's been put to here, right? And he also must know the circumstances of his imprisonment. Why he's been trapped here to do this. Okay, you're expected to do this until X condition. So until X number of years, or X condition happens, right? And it could be, as BSB Care points out, like some sort of thing where when you see someone with Wave, you'll know that they're the heroes. Try and lead them to putting Black Razor together. If someone comes into the complex and they're not carrying Wave, then try to destroy them using the menagerie and using the resources at your disposal, because they're clearly traitors. Try to protect the pieces of Black Razor. It could be it could make an interesting. That's an interesting concept. That's a good premise, right? Is like, I'm the Great Oz, and I'm here to destroy you if you don't have this thing. But you have this thing, but I can't tell you straight up, like, give you these pieces. They're hidden around here, and I can't leave. So that's the last bit of the whole. I like the funhouse aspect of this area within White Plume Mountain. I'm glad we didn't do the whole thing like that, but I like it for this particular section, because we've been able to use it as an opportunity to, like, fill in some history and story with some of the dioramas and stuff like that, and make some connections with Werwent's wondrous inventions and things. It's made me feel like White Plume Mountain is now more connected to what's going on in the greater campaign than it otherwise would have. So I feel pretty happy about that. Nightsteed asks, what if the Oni is disguised as a halfling? Would it show up as one of Avril's parents to deceive them?
I think there's a couple issues with that, and one is I wouldn't want Avril's parents to show up without Havana being there. I think that would be weird. And then I think the other question is like, is this an openly hostile encounter? And as we talk about it, as you know, this guy is essentially the park operator. I don't think it is a hostile encounter. No, I just think it's maybe an opportunity for another role-playing encounter is what it is. Yeah, I mean, it could be an. So a couple things to keep in mind. Like number one, she's not there, so having a scene with her parents there is incredibly unfair to her. She comes back the next week and goes, "What do you mean you talked to my like that guy dressed as my parents? Like, what is that all about?" You know, and not only that, but it doesn't really work story-wise because she's the one with the highest attachment or the greatest attachment to that NPC, right? Her parents. And the other characters in the party maybe know of her parents and know that her parents are a meaningful missing piece of her story, but they don't have the same attachment to those people, right? It'd be far more interesting if the Oni pretends to be Thawne's father. Now it goes off on a totally like, you've raised me, I'm back from the dead, I'm here to, lead your best life. Or it could be, the Oni could be one of Tak's voices, could pretend to be Sir Eldrick. So there's other people that I think that if that Oni's going to deceive them, there's other characters, NPCs, that Oni could take on the form of and have much more punch for this particular session, given that we know that Havana can't make it, right? So, yeah, it would technically be fulfilling the wish, right? Although I have some other ideas about that, but it would certainly be like, it would certainly give us an idea, like me as the DM and you all as the audience, it would give us an idea of where Thawne thinks that this is going, what his response is going to be, and is it too easy for his dad to show up again? I don't know. Yeah, all things to consider. So, I don't think, having had this discussion, I don't think there's a lot we need to add to this spur of White Plume Mountain. I think we can go through the next two encounters as written, not as written, but the two mapped out encounters of the playing Shank and then encountering the Oni somehow. We can go through those, have the setup deal with Wave, and then get back into kind of like developing our plot line and where does Wave go and what happens with Thawne's dad and how does the rest of the keep play into this, or what's the role of Black Razor, and then we'll get back around to this. There's a bunch of different things that we need to get back around to, other areas of the keep. These things especially need to come up, right? The silent whistle and the whippoorwill, those things need to become evident. What's involved? If the book is the keep's prison or dungeon, that needs to come forward and be made explicit. And how they go about freeing Del also needs to be made explicit in this session. And I think they're going to have some questions around how that works, and it's going to take some finesse in order to get that information out there. So that should be the basis for a pretty solid session. Now, freeing Del in the book is the prison. That brings us to kind of our final topic, which isn't on the map here today. But the question that all of this, the main question that's going to come out of tomorrow night's session is what happens next? Where do we go next? We're really reaching a point where White Plume Mountain is going to wrap up pretty hard and pretty quick, and we need to have a grip on what's that next step, what's the next part of the journey, what are we going to be doing a week from tomorrow. We haven't really laid a bunch of very explicit groundwork for this, but we have talked about the idea of, okay, maybe they go into the book and have to either destroy the book from the inside, or free someone from the book, or find the MacGuffin which will activate that cell, right? So I think, we've got the potential to do some adventuring inside the book. I don't want that to be, an entire adventure arc like we did with White Plume Mountain or the Sunless Citadel, but I think we could tag it in there as this is how you get Del out of the book. That raises a much larger question, which I will pose to you all, but I don't know that we'll necessarily come to a resolution for it today, which is, what adventure do we tackle once this particular loop is over, right? So once they get Del out of the book, they confront Thawne's father, and there's some implications or whatever of these wishes that they've made, or maybe they unlock some more potential with the Iron Keep, what have you. Once we kind of get to that piece, which is probably 2 or 3 sessions away, what's the big adventure that we're going to tackle next? Now, originally I was planning on doing Tomb of Annihilation. And I have the book on pre-order. I'm going to pick it up on Friday. I think it's interesting. It's this big sandbox adventure. I'm interested in definitely reading it and seeing what I can mine out of it, and kind of how things changed from when I read through the alpha version to what actually finally made it to print, etc. Right? So those things are fine, but here's the main issue, and I'm thinking of this in terms of my game, and I'm thinking of this in terms of our channel, which is, there's already at least 5 different streams who are running Tomb of Annihilation material, right? You've got Force Grey, and you've got Maze Arcana, and you've got the official D&D Dice Camera Action, and they've got 2 or 3 other people, the people in Australia, and the Geek Girls and whatnot, and I feel like there's enough people running this that if you want to watch Tomb of Annihilation being run, you have plenty of options to do that, right? So it doesn't it doesn't feel like a necessary or savvy move to be an also ran with all of the other Tomb of Annihilation content that's going on out there. That's the way I feel about it, in terms of, I got to look at what is our channel about, what is our channel doing, why compete with the marketing horsepower of the whole WotC network that's going on when we don't have to, right? So I'm inclined at this point, I'm strongly inclined not to run Tomb of Annihilation for the next big adventure arc that we're talking about. I do enjoy having published material to draw from and hack and change and rearrange and adapt, and I do feel like that's interesting, and it's also an interesting exercise for the audience to watch, how you take material that's written and then massage it and rework it into something that's more interesting and highly tailored to your particular play group. So I think it's a valuable exercise. We certainly did it with Storm King's Thunder, but I don't think advertising ourselves as yet another Tomb of Annihilation stream is going to bring new viewers in. And much as I love you all, we also have to bring new viewers in. Let's offer an alternative. So there is that. So James V brings up Curse of Strahd. I do think Curse of Strahd is an ideal fit in terms of, you reskin Strahd to be Gulthias, You have a very sandbox-style adventure where they could meet NPCs and make connections and kind of travel about this very kind of limited world and go on these loose quests and meet people and have a climactic showdown with a vampire. In terms of what we have going on, the themes of our campaign, it's an ideal like hand-in-glove fit. However, it also does suffer from literally being like last year's hotness, right? And Dice Camera Action just came out of a 1.5-year arc of Curse of Strahd. And I realize it's going to be difficult to play something that they're not, play a 5e published adventure that hasn't already been played on stream, but that's the part of it that makes me a little bit like, well, what's the draw? What's the newness about it? Again, it seems like covering territory that's already been trod on. Christian Linky suggests Castle Amber. That could be interesting. So let me buzz bomb you with a couple of my alternative suggestions. And there's really 3. So a very simple one is that we could try and follow the adventure path that was laid out by the original 3E modules in this series. Sunless Citadel eventually leads to Heart of Nightfang Spire, where I believe you at least encounter the heart of Gulthias, if not Gulthias himself. So we could somehow kind of like bang together some sort of homebrew campaign that would maybe have a couple one-off adventures that we adapt and lead to that. Like, that's a pretty rough adventure. I mean, in terms of like, it's got some pretty brutal encounters to it. Bruce Cordell certainly took advantage of all of the tricks in 3rd edition to make that thing work. Yeah, Heart of Nightfang Spire. So we could try and get to that point. Maybe. That's one option. It's not hugely appealing to me because I don't think we can just grab that one adventure and make the whole thing sing, right? We'd probably have to do 2 or 3 adventures. We'd have to have at least one transitional adventure and then go into Heart of Nightfang Spire. That's fine. I mean, ideally, I'm looking for something to adapt. I don't want to have to do a bunch of homebrew, story invention, encounter creation, encounter design, etc., etc., etc. The other 2 ideas that I've got sort of bubbling here would be the next step that we take would either be tackle Curse of Gardmore Abbey or Madness at Gardmore Abbey, which is a 4E dungeon, which is very modular and can be kind of pared down or brushed up into a bunch of different kind of quests. It does have a very 4th edition feel where it's like, here's the map and here's the da-da-da-da-da. So that's something that we could do. I like it because it involves an artifact, and I think you could tie fairly cleanly into the Iron Keep. And it keeps kind of like pushing that epic kind of sweep that we've been working on in our current adventure path. So I think that's one thing that I'm considering is Madness at Gardmore Abbey. It has some nice props and battle maps to it and things like that. It certainly kind of adheres to the old 4E encounters format, but there's also like plenty of room for role-playing encounters and alternate story developments and that sort of thing. So that's something to consider. The final thing that I'm considering at this point, obviously I'm open to suggestions, is to shift gears into somehow get moving toward Expedition to the Barrier Peaks. I like Expedition to the Barrier Peaks in terms of it continues our tradition of playing these old school AD&D modules in a 5e format. I also like it because it has not, to my knowledge, been adapted for 5e by any official source. And secondly, I think there's some interesting design work there to be done, or some interesting hacks that could be done, where we can take this old school module, which is really a very kind of bare bones dungeon crawl, kind of like beat the robot until it opens up and disgorges its gems type of thing, into something more interesting, and a little more with some more narrative, meat to sink your teeth into. So I think there's the added appeal there of, okay, well, we're taking this old school AD&D module, which is in and of itself considered a classic, and we're exposing the rusty old parts for what they are, and we're going to swap in a brand new engine, and we're going to put some ground effects lights on it and try and make this thing really rev up and sing. So that's the third option that I'm considering. I don't know if we'll do this as a Patreon poll, or maybe I just have to kind of decide, but I'm certainly curious about your input. We don't have to decide today, but I want you to think about it, kind of chew it over, watch the way things play out tomorrow night, and we can circle back around and talk about it tomorrow. We can talk about it next week, whatever, as that time. We're not on top of it yet, but I need to start thinking. I'm at the point where I'm like, what's the next thing? Even if we have 2 or 3 more sessions to deal with some stuff, I want to start thinking about laying the groundwork and getting some of those plot seeds planted for down the road, right? I did think about a Planescape adventure, doing like a Beyond Countless Doorways thing. I thought about doing like Dead Gods, the old Monty Cook Planescape adventure, and I also considered just straight up doing like the Talus adventure arc that's in that book. But basically the Bane Warrens, right? Like we could do the Bane Warrens. That gets kind of dungeon crawly too, but it could be interesting. James V says, what about a Sliders-like adventure caused by the Ironkeep portals getting reactivated but not controlled? So Thon's portal ranger abilities could be highlighted as guiding them out, and you can reskin old adventures like the ones you're talking about, and you could throw other old school adventures like Isle of Dread in there, etc. That's certainly a possibility. I'm looking for something that's a little meatier than... those 32-page adventures are like almost a little bit too much, but not enough at the same time. So if I were to do that, I would look for something that's maybe like a 12 to 18-page adventure. And kind of like the 16-page adventure that'd be like half size. That would be perfect. Like you could almost take a bunch of those old like Book of Lairs type of things and maybe work them in or something like that, or do just do something that's a little shorter and more concise. So, all right, that's a topic for you all to chew on and think about. What would you like to see? What would you like to see me kind of put my DM claws into? What would you like to see the players like grapple and wrestle with? If you have suggestions or whatnot, you can always at me. Well, don't at me on Twitter because people will see that, right? But you can. My DMs are open. You can DM me on Twitter. I do have a few old dungeon magazines. That's always like hit and miss in terms of generally decent quality, but finding what's thematically appropriate for your level is always tricky. The other thing that I like about Expedition of the Barrier Peaks is you say, oh, we're running Expedition of the Barrier Peaks, and a bunch of people immediately know what you're talking about. Whereas if you say, I'm running the Worm from dungeon number 221, there's a subset of gamers who are like, oh, that's cool, I want to see how you do that. But most of them are like, oh, what's Dungeon Magazine? So, as Farquaad says, we could have a musical adventure. Maybe that'll be our interlude between this plot arc and the next, is we'll Joss Whedon the thing and we'll have a musical one-off. I don't think that's going to happen. Although Amy and Havana are both talented enough to pull it off, I don't want to saddle myself with that responsibility, or Gaurav, or Eric. So that brings us to the end of our time. We did go a little bit over, but not much. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll find out tomorrow night how it all plays out. Let's take a look at our calendar. Oh, Castle Greyhawk. Oh, oh, Christian, a pox on you for even mentioning that adventure. Tomorrow night is the Iron Keep Chronicles. Nothing else going on today. Pretty mellow. Thursday, I'm not sure, is this the updated calendar? Is Thursday night Crit Juice again? Maybe so. Friday night, of course, is Wild Cards. I don't know that this is updated. Refresh. Is there a refresh? I don't know. Alright. Stop. Stop. It's last week's. I'm not sure what the deal is there. Properties. Browse. Open. I don't know that Dom updated it. Maybe it is the same. I don't know what the deal is. Is there Patreon chat on Saturday? I'm not sure what to do with this. Sorry, everyone. I will... Farquaad says yes. I'm not sure what it is. So, I'm a little out of the loop here. Obviously, the long weekend has taken its toll on not only my memory, but also my information awareness here. So, we'll follow Save and Throw Show on Twitter. All of the magic will be revealed. I know Dom was out of town for Ben Dunn's wedding all weekend, so he was a little swamped too. He was best man. He had a lot going on. So I feel like the whole channel is a little bit trying to catch up with Monday when Monday's already passed us by. So, a fireside chat with Dom. yeah. Hopefully not literally. I think they've got the Latuna Canyon fire mostly under control. Hopefully it hasn't flared back up today. So we'll see how that goes. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I'm looking forward to tomorrow night's game. It should be interesting. Thank you for all of your suggestions. Thanks to Farquaad for modding. Thanks to all of our regulars for all of your contributions. And until next time, let's dungeon. Let's dungeon. Oh, I did it. BSB Care. What am I up to? I'm over 500, you guys. Over 500.